Hello and welcome to REO Digital's Snackable Series on GA4 and the sunsetting of Universal Analytics. This is session 3 of 3. It's our final time together across this. I'm sure you're all very sad. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about what to do once you have a working implementation, kind of what comes after that. How can we further improve upon that data, and how can we also take that data and do interesting things with it? What can be achieved now that we have good data coming in? Before we get into all that, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, once again, my name is Finbar Deane-Stott. I am a data and analytics consultant here at REO Digital. And as for my bona fides, I have been working in this industry and in agency side for around a little under 10 years now, doing all manner of implementations, many of them Google Analytics focused. Without no further ado, let's jump into what we're talking about today. So I'd like to split today into kind of two parts. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the new methods that Google has introduced to improve upon tracking beyond just gather data about a person who has consented, and how we can use that to kind of further enhance our data set, improve its accuracy and reliability, and get to grips with different things that we've been capable of doing within Universal. And then after that, I want to talk a little about kind of further things we can do with you to help you push analytics further into your business, embed it more as a pillar of decision making, and take advantage of all the things that we are gathering. So, starting off, what new things exist that we can use to further enhance this data set? We're going to talk about two of them today, the first one of which is what is called consent mode. Now, I referenced this briefly in the first of these webinars, but if you don't remember, this is a feature designed to answer the question, how do we know how many people didn't opt in? How many users did we have who blocked cookies for whatever reason? Previously, this has been kind of unknowable because the tracking relies on cookies, so if they don't consent to cookies, we can't track them not accepting cookies. There have been some very nebulous workaround methods that have kind of got us here, but it is ropey to say the least. Consent mode, on the other hand, is supposed to help us answer this question. The way that it functions is that normally when somebody does something on your site, say looks at a page, the GA4 script will load and it will fire an event out to the Google servers with this user, with this cookie ID, who has consented to be tracked, looked at page X. So when you enable consent mode, what happens is that when somebody triggers a page view event, but they have yet to opt into being tracked by cookies, or indeed have opted out, an event is still sent, but it is now what Google will refer to as a cookieless ping. That is to say, no cookie is set on the user's browser, and no cookie ID is sent with the event hit. Once it reaches Google servers, this data is partitioned from your standard data from your consented users. We will then use the standard data we have as kind of a mold through which Google builds a model that it then runs over all these unconsented cookieless pings to get a better understanding of actually what those visits look like, how many users make up that traffic, so on and forth. So you will get an enhanced understanding of what your actual total traffic was like, not just the subset of people who consented. There are a few limitations with this data. It's not available in custom reporting, for instance. It's only in the standard reports that GA4 provides. And also you have to hit certain volumes of traffic of both consented and unconsented data before the model can be reliably applied. However, it still gives us a lot of extra knowledge that we would just totally be without prior to, about where these users kind of came from and what their visits and traffic looked like. The reason this data gets restricted from the other places is in part to prevent us from adding in a bunch of extra identifying information in custom fields and whatnot that we could use to sort of disambiguate the identities of users who've asked requests not to be tracked via cookies and sort of violate the spirit of the rules, even if not necessarily the letter of cookie tracking. The second feature I'd like to discuss is what is called server-side tracking. So this is a Google Tag Manager feature that Google have introduced not specifically for GA4, but sort of has come out alongside GA4 as a feature and is being strongly encouraged as a partner to it. The way Google Tag Manager works currently is that it sits on your website. When a user loads up the site, their browser loads the Tag Manager, and everything inside gets evaluated and then triggers your analytics and your social media marketing pixels and what marketing campaign analysis you have, marketing pixels you have running, and fires all that data off. The issue with that is that as lightweight as Google Tag Manager and most tag designers try to make these products, the more of them you have, this is a load on the user's end browser. The browser still has to process all of this information before it can before it can do the tracking. Server-side tracking is the idea where instead of having all of this load in the user's browser, that instead the browser just fires off all of this information and the processing is handled entirely after the fact inside of a server elsewhere. The advantages are twofold. The first is mostly about performance. It is much easier to just send a dump of interactions that have happened and let the server process and figure that out after the fact. And then the user's browser doesn't have to do any of that evaluation of triggers itself, and therefore it's freeing up resources for it to have more responsive page times and load times. The other advantage is that we get a finer control of exactly what data we're processing and what we're letting through in the server-side tag itself. This ranges from we can have a much tighter control over kind of how we process PII and detect whether that's being sent and redact it as necessary, which you may find like sometimes email addresses get set inside of URLs when a login function throws an error, or similarly people may use a search function to look for their addresses for a delivery. We can make sure that that's being very carefully removed before it ever even gets to your Google Analytics property. It also lets us deal with spam data more efficiently. There was a long-running kind of marketing, I'm going to call it a less than pleasant marketing effort done by certain websites, which involved grabbing a Universal Analytics property code off of somebody's site and then spamming hits to their analytics after having placed that code on their own site, which would be called buymybots.com or equivalent. Using server-side tracking, we can append a small amount of information after the fact that shows specifically this is coming from our own tracking, that there would be no way somebody just looking at the site would be able to see and copy, because all that processing happens after it leaves their browser. So these two tools we can use to better analyze and understand our total set of users, as well as make the experience for them respect their privacy better, and also make sure that it is more secure and better performing. But that is all about refining our tracking and improving upon it. The question then is, we have all this data, what next? A big thing that has come up a lot throughout the industry is this idea of wanting to be data-driven, to make data-driven decisions. But having data is only the first step on that. The next step is we need to put it in the hands of stakeholders, of decision makers, of analysts. And obviously this leads to a huge amount of considerations of what data is relevant to whom, and to what granularity does each audience need it, so on and forth. We can help you build out a strategy for this reporting, either using in-interface work to make a set of core reports that are going to answer questions broken down by whatever particular needs you have, be that regional or based on different time groups like weekly, monthly, so on, or if they're digging deep into specific marketing efforts and what have you, or analyzing certain parts of the site for different levels of performance, both at just sort of an overview level of which are my best landing pages, where do I have a high bounce rate, to a very granular, what errors did somebody encounter on what pages, how did that affect their ongoing journey, did this drastically affect their conversion rates, and so on, so we can really hyper-target in on specific problems. And we can help you there using GA4's own custom reporting tools, which, as I mentioned previously, have been much improved since Universal Analytics and can be used to help build out a suite of extremely useful reports and interface. There's always going to be a portion of the audience who are unable to take the time to get trained up or not interested in going into the interface itself, or you may have your own reasons internally where you want to control access to the analytics to make sure that that is tightly managed by a small group, but the data is still accessible. In that case, what we're looking at making dashboards that are easy to just glance at without needing to know how to navigate the whole interface. One of the most common tools to do this for Google is using what is called Looker Studio, previously known as Data Studio, that people may be familiar with, which is another Google product and can very easily pull data out of Google Analytics into its setup, where we can transform it, apply your brand colors and themes, and also transform the data as we need to make it extremely clear to all those coming in exactly what they're looking at and give them the answers to all their questions. Another advantage of this method is that it lets us put some amount of data control in the hands of the end user, so they can flip through different sections they want to, sections of site focus they want to look at, or indeed change the data range they're looking at, meaning that you aren't going to have to field the same question every week, every month, every 3 months, because there will be a place that already answers all the questions. They just have to update the date range to cover the appropriate time. So this serves us two purposes. One, putting data directly in the hands of your stakeholders, and that they need to understand their performance to modify their campaigns, the way they're creating content, whatever it may be. But also your core analytics team is freed up from having to answer lots of questions about and just pull ad hoc reports about how many times did this get downloaded, how many times this page get looked at, because all the answers are already in this dashboard. One of the next things that I talk about, and it's going to be extremely important in my opinion in the coming wave of how we're going to work with GA4, is BigQuery. As I've said previously, BigQuery is now available to users of standard GA, which means that now it is extremely easy for standard GA users to get access to the advanced analysis tools of BigQuery. For those of you who are unaware of BigQuery, what it does or is, it is Google's cloud computing piece of software. And what that essentially means is that if you're able to get your data sets out of Google Analytics and into BigQuery, you can then use SQL, which is the coding language, to query that data, which essentially, the advantage of analytics platforms is they take all these different interactions that happen on your site and they chop them up into nice condensed tables with a set structure that's quick to load and access and very easy, user-friendly, I should say, for your analysts and whatnot to pull up and look at and review. But that advantage comes with its particular costs. You are setting down a particular structure of how the data is going to be, of how it's going to look and whatnot. BigQuery allows us to unpick that structure and ask very specific questions of the data set, as long as you can write the SQL to do so. Allowing us to transform that data, to pull the structure apart and piece it back together again, and indeed do things that Google Analytics would find quite difficult, like for instance journey analysis of users throughout the site. While Google Analytics can show you a funnel and people moving through set discrete steps, using BigQuery we can find the paths that many different users are taking and allocate them appropriately. On top of that, it also is much easier in BigQuery to mesh it with data sets that maybe don't traditionally join on. For instance, I've previously myself used BigQuery to meld data sets around purchases to later on customer surveys. Because we shared a small ID, we could import data from both those places and then meld them after the fact. Allowed us to identify different products that maybe had worse feedback as a group and what we could do to address that. And then a thing to say about BigQuery for the Google Analytics interface is not the prettiest thing on the planet. BigQuery, the output of any BigQuery piece of work is a large table. However, it has its own links as another Google product back out to places like Looker Studio and so on, that makes it very easy and straightforward for us to take the results of these queries, which we can continue to run on a periodic basis, and load them into a nice, neat dashboard. So even if we are doing a very advanced piece of analysis, we can still take that output, transform it into something very accessible and pleasant to look at, and put it in a dashboard that's very easy to access for a lot of people. Everyone is about to be pushed into using a new platform. However willing they are to abandon Universal Analytics come the 1st of July, Google is going to force them. And it is a different beast. There's many similarities in the way that Universal Analytics and GA4 worked, but there are many quite significant differences and indeed additions to what was previously possible. To that end, we can help make that move over quicker and less stressful for all involved by offering training sessions, both that could take somebody from never having used GA at all to knowing how to navigate and take advantage of a GA4 dataset, or indeed a more Universal Analytics to GA4 conversion course designed to kind of move somebody over and explain these are the differences, these are the new names for things you may have previously been using, and the new features you can look forward to and take advantage and use. And I believe it would be remiss of me as a member of a CRO agency not to mention, lastly, one of the best uses I think personally for a good working tracking implementation is to do a CRO or conversion rate optimization program. For those of you unfamiliar, CRO is the practice of identifying a point in your user's journey where there is an issue, trialing a change where you send half of your traffic to the original version and half of the traffic to the new variation of the page, and seeing which performs better over time and how that affects both a key metric in that moment as well as downstream metrics from that. For instance, if you make a change on a product page, you want to know how it immediately affects add to carts, but you also want to know, does it have an unexpected effect further downstream on how many people end up buying? In my personal opinion, it is one of the best ways to apply this data set that we have created, because every single decision is being driven specifically by data, proven out by it, and then we apply those findings over and over and over again in small iterations that add up to quite large percentage uplifts over time to your revenue and site performance. With all that being said, we have now reached the end of this particular webinar, so we will take some questions now. Thank you.